Are they being this transparent with people? Are they saying to those who approach them at their carts, you know, wouldn't it be nice if someone else were to own your life? Why don't they use this rhetoric when they're preaching? That would be refreshing, wouldn't it? It would be refreshing if they could be honest enough with the public, with those that they're trying to convince to join them, if they could be honest enough to use this kind of language. Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to The Attic. In this video, I will be giving my thoughts on the Saturday of the 2025 Pure Worship Convention of Jehovah's Witnesses. Yes, a full day of talks and videos designed to help Jehovah's Witnesses understand how they should be making their worship more pure. So, as you can imagine, there's a lot of material that we need to discuss, so without further ado,
roll camera.
If you have left the truth, return to Jehovah. Again, there could be different reasons that would make a person to hesitate. Maybe they wonder, has Jehovah forgiven me? Can he forgive me? Let's allow Jehovah to answer that. Turn with me to Isaiah chapter 44. Verse 22. Isaiah chapter 44, verse 22. And we see Jehovah's words as inspired in his word, the Bible. I will blot out your transgressions as with a cloud, and your sins as with a thick cloud. Return to me, for I will repurchase you. So here Jehovah is telling that he covers transgressions of those who repent as with a cloud. Now in Seattle, they have a saying, the mountain is out, referring to Mount Rainier. It's a large mountain. It's the tallest in the state of Washington. But on a number of days, it is covered with cloud. You can't see it. It's like it's not even there. That's why they get pretty excited when they do, and they have this saying, the mountain's out. And this is what Jehovah does with our transgressions. He covers it with a cloud. He chooses not to see. To him, it's like it's not even there. So if you have left the truth, accept Jehovah's invitation to return to him. Return to your Father who is large-hearted in forgiveness.
well, that's quite some invitation. Thank you for that. Benjamin Hess, Benjamin, who is from Wallkill Bethel, is giving the symposium item, Imitate Those Who Love Pure Worship, Andrew. And he's reminding Jehovah's Witnesses, or specifically those who used to be Jehovah's Witnesses, that if they want to, they can always return. They can come back to the organization. I have two thoughts on this. Firstly, isn't it interesting how the blame is always on those who leave? It's inconceivable to Jehovah's Witnesses that it could possibly be something wrong with the organization that has caused someone to leave Jehovah or leave the organization. They have a whole brochure called Return to Jehovah, and not once does it even countenance the possibility that someone might legitimately leave on conscientious grounds or on ideological grounds due to an ideological difference with the teachings and the policies of Jehovah's Witnesses. According to this organization, if you leave or if you stray or if you stop attending meetings for a while, that is a problem with you. And you need to fix that problem. It could never possibly be a problem with the organization. And that's where they have this massive blind spot. Whenever they're talking about returning to Jehovah, they can never ever understand that people might leave for conscientious reasons. In other words, not because they are bad people, but because they've seen something bad in the organization. And the second thing I wanted to notice was just that imagery. So Benjamin Hess there talks about the mountain is out. I'd never heard of that one before. I guess you need to be from Seattle to know about that one. Or maybe the saying is more widespread. But it's an interesting metaphor, isn't it? The mountain is out. So if you have sinned or transgressed, it's like your sin or transgression is this mountain that's completely covered in cloud so that it's not there anymore. And in that context, I'd like to remind you that one of the things that you can be disfellowshipped for as a Jehovah's Witness is abusing a child. So what he's actually saying there, if you think about it, is that if someone abuses a child and comes back, that's how people are to view them, as though it never happened. They are to completely forget that this is what this individual has done. And anybody who understands anything on this topic, or who even has basic comprehension skills, will understand that those who abuse children will flourish and thrive in an organization where their actions can be so easily concealed, and where concealing their actions is so readily encouraged.
The first quality is loyalty. Peter showed loyalty. He was moved and motivated to do so because of his love for pure worship. Can you think of any occasions when Peter did just so? Maybe when others did not? Well, turn with me in your copies of God's Word, the Bible, to the book of John, the 6th chapter. Now, the setting for this is 32 CE, so 2.5 years into Jesus' earthly ministry. Jesus is speaking to many of his disciples that already has shown a measure of loyalty, a measure of love for pure worship. But would they continue to follow him? Well, in verse 56 of that chapter, of chapter 6, Jesus says something that many feel is controversial. So what's the result? Well, in verse 66, it tells us that many are stumbled and they would no longer walk with Jesus. How disappointing. When it got to a point when they couldn't understand the teachings of Jesus, they decided to no longer be loyal. But what about Jesus' closest friends? And what about Peter? Well, let's consider verse 67. So Jesus said to the 12, "You do not want to go also, do you?" Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, whom shall we go away to? You have sayings of everlasting life." Here, Peter affirmed his determination to remain loyal to Jesus, although it's highly unlikely that he understood fully Jesus' words. What moved Peter to remain loyal to the Christ? It was his love for pure worship.
We've just been listening to Martin Fuller, who is a Bethelite from the Wallkill Bethel. He is giving the symposium item, Imitate Those Who Love Pure Worship, Peter. And this is an oft-repeated verse, John 6, verse 68. "Lord, whom shall we go away to? You have sayings of everlasting life." You can see where Martin is going with this. He's reminding Jehovah's Witnesses that if they want their worship to be pure, they need to have loyalty. They need to be loyal. But is the loyalty to Jesus? Or is the loyalty to an organization that claims to represent Jesus? I think we all know the answer to that question, and it's going to be made very, very clear in the next clip.
How can we imitate the Apostle Peter's love for pure worship. Well, just as Peter remained loyal to Jesus, it's important for all of us to continue to display our loyalty to the ones whom Jesus has appointed to take the lead, the faithful and discreet slave. And aren't they worthy of our trust and confidence? You know, sometimes we may think to ourselves, where would I be if it wasn't for Jehovah's organization? And if you're like me, you shudder to even imagine what your life would be like if you didn't know Jehovah, and if it wasn't for the slave helping you to know and love Jehovah. Continue to be motivated by love, to display love towards pure worship by remaining loyal to the faithful and discreet slave.
Fascinating, isn't it? Fascinating. So, according to this guy, Martin Fuller, Jehovah's Witnesses should shudder. They should shudder to even imagine not having the faithful and discreet slave in their lives, not having the governing body to tell them how they should be living their lives and what they should be thinking and what they should be believing. Martin apparently cannot even conceive an existence where he doesn't have the governing body holding his hand. He's a grown man, and he cannot imagine an organization not telling him how he should think and what he should do with his life and what decisions he should be making, even in such areas as what medicine he should or should not accept. And this is the mindset of total compliance and total loyalty that Jehovah's Witnesses are being drilled with at this year's convention.
But do you also see in this same set of verses John's love for pure worship? Do you see his strong conviction in the kingdom? After all, would they ask for a position in the kingdom if they didn't believe in the reality of it? So we also see that here. So here we have a man of strong faith battling a spirit of competition, which was widespread among the Jews. In fact, it can be said that this spirit of competition was a part of their culture, and it affected all of the apostles, which is why Jesus often had to give them counsel regarding this.
Did anyone else find that a bit odd? A spirit of competition was widespread among the Jews. So this is Brandon French. He is a Bethelite at Wallkill Bethel. He's giving the talk, Imitate Those Who Love Pure Worship, John. And he just slips in this thing about how the Jewish people were known for their spirit of competition without citing any sources or any data to back up this claim. And for me, it just feels a bit off. It feels, dare I say it, it feels anti-Semitic. Because, and I think that the organization does this quite a lot, and usually it kind of flies under the radar, but especially in the current dynamic globally of rising fascism, and I understand that people will have very strong feelings about what's going on in Gaza right now and all of that. I understand all of that, but I think it's really, really important when tensions are running so high globally that we avoid generalizations as much as possible. And when you're talking about Jesus and contextualizing, the world in which he supposedly lived, usually the organization will make generalizations about the Jewish religious leaders and the Pharisees, and they will say they were arrogant or they were haughty or they were blah, blah, blah. And They make it very clear that they're talking about the Jewish religious leaders. But here, Brandon says that the entire Jewish people were known for their spirit of competition. Where is this coming from, would be my question. What is the basis for you saying this, for you making this generalization about Jewish people? And yes, you can say, oh, he's talking about the way Jewish people were in Jesus' day. He's not necessarily talking about Jewish people now. Okay, well, again, you still need to be citing some sources if you're going to make such a sweeping claim. He's not citing any sources. He's making a sweeping claim about an entire demographic of people that, quite frankly, is supportive of the way many anti-Semitic people feel about Jewish people. And that's disturbing. And just to be clear, I don't think this is coming from Brandon. I think that Brandon is just reading the words on a page. In fact, I know he is just reading the words on the outline in front of him, or he is reciting the words that have been given to him by the teaching committee, which organizes the material that Jehovah's Witnesses need to consider at these conventions. So it's really the teaching committee who we need to be asking these questions of. But I do think it's worth flagging, particularly in the current global climate of rising fascism and rising tensions and rising anti-Semitism, I do think it's worth flagging that you really should not be making sweeping generalizations like this.
I always wanted to use my youth to please Jehovah. But I was also concerned about being able to care for my parents and my brothers financially. In the country where I grew up, a common goal was to go to university, to get a good job and look after your parents. It was a difficult dilemma. During that time, we had an assembly, and one of the speakers highlighted Ephesians 3 verse 20, which shows that Jehovah will give us much more than what we need if we put kingdom interests first. That really touched my heart, and from that moment, I decided to enter the full-time service and not to go to university. I chose to follow a technical course that would give me the practical aptitudes that could help me to find a job. At first, my family wasn't pleased with my decision. Even people in the congregation tried to change my mind. In 2016, 3 years after I decided not to go to university, my father passed away. That was devastating because we loved him very much, and he was the principal breadwinner in the family. If I had gone to university, I would have still been a student when I lost my father, and I would not have been able to look after my family. But because of the technical course that I took, I was able to find work that allowed me to support my family. At Psalm 37 verse 5, we are encouraged to commit our way to Jehovah, not to follow the course our culture defines. I believe Jehovah is happy with the decisions I have made. I now serve as a regular pioneer with my wife, and we are able to raise our precious daughter together. Looking back on the decision I made, it brings me the greatest joy that I handed over my life to Jehovah.
He handed over his life to Jehovah. That's apparently what Jehovah's Witnesses should be doing, handing over their lives. Nothing at all alarming about that rhetoric. So we've just been hearing from Zovo Samuel Fernando from Angola, He's been giving a testimonial about how grateful he is that he turned his back on university and how that worked out really well for him. And I just think it's sad that this personal experience is being used to manipulate an entire generation into basically making themselves poorer and less successful, basically limiting their opportunities. And did you notice the really messed up logic that we're expected to buy into here? And just to be clear, as someone who has lost a parent himself at a young age, I really do feel for Zovo that he lost his father, and in any circumstances, but especially in those difficult circumstances that he mentioned, my heart goes out to him. It's a terrible thing to lose someone who's so close to you, and it leaves a huge hole in your life. But the way that loss and that grief was used to justify skipping out on university. So basically his reasoning was, if I'd been in university, I would have still been studying when my father passed away, and therefore I wouldn't have been in a position to work and be a breadwinner for my family when they needed me to be a breadwinner. That was his argumentation. It's a what-if scenario. So young Jehovah's Witnesses are basically being told, well, what if this happens? You've got to apparently think about every single eventuality that might impact on your family. And you've got to be prepared as a young Jehovah's Witness to drop everything and be the breadwinner for your family, because what if your mother dies or your father dies and it's on you? What if suddenly you need to work but you can't because you're studying? That's the reasoning. That is the shameful reasoning that is here being given to try to convince and manipulate an entire generation into making themselves less successful and have fewer opportunities, just so they can better serve this organization.
So here Paul's talking about how Jehovah made the waters of the Red Sea stand up like walls on both sides. And interestingly, the Watchtower a few years ago said it's possible that those walls went up 50 feet. So they were surrounded by what? By water. Well, now, how did Paul describe the event? Look at verse 2. It says they all got baptized into Moses by means of the cloud and the sea. A baptism into Moses. Well, in a sense, Israel got baptized. Now, to help us understand what that really means, we're using the New World Translation, and most of us have that. You can notice the study note on verse 2, and it clearly helps us to see that Paul's talking about a symbolic baptism. Again, they were surrounded by water. They were hidden from Pharaoh and the Egyptians by the cloud. So for Israel, in order to be baptized this way, they had to join with Moses as their God-given leader and follow his direction through the Red Sea. And interestingly enough, those who did that were rewarded. They were brought up onto the other side as a free nation. Well, now what's the lesson for us? What can we learn from that? Well, like Israel, Jehovah will reward all of us if we obey him and his son. And we remember what Hebrews chapter 13, 17 says. We need to be obedient to those that are taking the lead among us today. And like Moses, they've been carefully chosen and assigned by Jehovah to watch over us, to take care of us, protect us. Isn't that a wonderful reward?
They're just watching over us. They're just protecting us, the governing body. There's nothing untoward going on here. They're not controlling you in any way, shape, or form. So we've just been hearing from Michael D. Gregorio. This is actually the baptism talk. Michael is a Bethelite at the Wallkill Bethel, and he's giving the talk, The Meaning of Your Baptism. So just for context, usually around about the Saturday lunchtime at these conventions is when they do the baptism. So Michael Gregorio is here directing his remarks towards a relatively small number of people who are getting baptized at this particular convention. And he's giving them this metaphor of the Jews crossing the Red Sea as being symbolic of a Christian baptism. And he's talking about how the Israelites were willing and ready to obey their God-given leader. So as soon as he said God-given leader, my ears pricked up, and I thought, I can see exactly where this is going. He's making the comparison, obviously, that the faithful and discreet slave, the governing body, are our God-given leader, or the God-given leader for Jehovah's Witnesses, and Jehovah's Witnesses just need to obey them no matter what. And that's precisely the tone that he continues with in his talk.
So when Jesus got baptized, he presented himself to Jehovah to do his will now as the Messiah. And that involved his preaching activity about Jehovah's kingdom in the coming times, and it also involved his ransom sacrifice, offering his life. Again, what do we learn from this third baptism? Well, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 21 makes a statement that all of us as Jehovah's people have heard many times. It says that Christ left a model for you to follow his steps closely. A model, following steps. What does that really say in simple terms? We're going to copy him. We have to imitate him. And we have to imitate the spirit he showed. And in reality, Jesus had a willing spirit. Yes, Jehovah, whatever you want, I'm willing to do. That helps us understand that. Moses' baptism, John the Baptist's baptism, and Jesus. They give us insight into our thinking and how Jehovah views these things. Well, that brings us down to today. And as we think about it as a candidate for baptism, you've taken time, you've studied. In prayer, privately before Jehovah, you said, yes, I'm going to serve you forever. You will be the owner of my life. I'm now dedicating myself to you. And this baptism that you're about to undergo as it is gives clear evidence of that. And we're proud of you for that.
You will be the owner of my life. I am going to dedicate myself to you. Thank you for putting it so clearly, I guess. But I guess my issue, apart from how overtly culty this rhetoric is where's the transparency when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses trying to recruit people on the street? Are they being this transparent with people? Are they saying to those who approach them at their carts, you know, wouldn't it be nice if someone else were to own your life? Why don't they use this rhetoric when they're preaching? That would be refreshing, wouldn't it? It would be refreshing if they could be honest enough with the public, with those that they're trying to convince to join them, if they could be honest enough to use this kind of language and say to people, hey, here's the deal. You shouldn't really be in control of your own life. You need someone else to own your life, and you need an organization to tell you what to do, and you need to be willing to obey that organization no matter what. Wouldn't it be refreshing if Jehovah's Witnesses were that straightforward when they're trying to recruit people?
The fulfillment of multiple prophecies helped people in the first century identify who the Messiah was. But what about for us? we learn that these fulfilled prophecies serve as a basis for our Christian faith. And in imitation of Jesus, we want to let our light shine. It motivates us to let our light shine. Today, we're living through the fulfillment of multiple prophecies. Brothers and sisters, think about that for a moment. We've witnessed the pushing of the king of the north and the king of the south. We've experienced the ride of the four horsemen. And all of us are involved in the never-to-be-repeated preaching work. This proves that we're living during the time of the Messiah's presence as the King of God's heavenly kingdom. Let messianic prophecies that have already come true strengthen your faith that Jesus will fulfill all the remaining prophecies, and all praise goes to Jehovah, our God, the God of true prophecy.
Yes, true prophecy, that's what it's all about, and that's what we've just been hearing from Brother Hubbard. Sorry, I don't know his first name. They literally announce him as Brother Hubbard. His first name could be, I don't know, Elron. He is giving the talk, Messianic Prophecy Fulfilled, Part 2, Shown a Great Light in Galilee. He's from the Patterson Bethel. And wow, he's just given us a list of prophecies that he claims are being fulfilled right now. And those prophecies are, we've witnessed the pushing of the king of the north and the king of the south. So he's referencing Daniel chapter 11, the king of the north, king of the south prophecy, which we know. Well, first of all, we know that the book of Daniel is a forgery. And if this is news to you, then let me just show you a thumbnail to a really interesting discussion I had with a Bible scholar, Dr. Richard Carrier, where he walked me through all of the reasons why scholars don't just assume Daniel to be a forgery, but know Daniel to be a forgery. So not only is the book of Daniel a forgery, but specifically Daniel chapter 11, which describes this battle or this tussle between the king of the north, king of the south, is really describing the Ptolemaic Wars. It's not talking about events in the here and now. And even Jehovah's Witnesses, when they're interpreting parts of Daniel 11, attribute it to the Ptolemaic Wars. It's just that they subjectively say at a certain point in the narrative, oh, now it's talking about events in the 20th century, and now it's talking about events in the last days. And it's all very convenient for them. They have found a way of shoehorning Bible prophecy into their narrative. Well, that's all very well for you. Anybody can do that. Any group can take any Bible verse, particularly Bible verses as vague as Daniel chapter 11, and say this means this or this means that. It's not objectively a reason for us to all say, well, now this prophecy is being fulfilled and we're seeing this before our very eyes. Hopefully that requires no further explanation. He also says we've experienced the ride of the four horsemen. So what was it? Death, Hades, famine, etc. Yeah, there is death, there is war, there is famine going on, but that's always been the case throughout human history. There's never been a moment in human history where no one has picked up a weapon or something that can be used as a weapon against another human being, or where people haven't been dying through starvation or through some kind of pestilence. That has always been the case, but Jehovah's Witnesses claim this is conspicuously happening now. And then he rounds off with his very brief list. Interesting how brief the list is of prophecies that we're seeing being fulfilled. He rounds off with, and all of us are involved in the never-to-be-repeated preaching work. So just because there is a preaching work, that means that we're in the last days. Of course, people have been preaching the Bible almost for as long as there's been a Bible. And it's not even like Jehovah's Witnesses are preaching throughout the entire inhabited earth, as they claim, because I'd really like to know what the Kabul congregation looks like in Afghanistan. I'd be really interested to know how many Jehovah's Witnesses are kicking about in North Korea. You know, it's fairly obvious that there are large parts of the planet where there are no Jehovah's Witnesses, and yet they claim that Jehovah's Witnesses are preaching in all of the inhabited earth and that this is a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. But the claim itself doesn't add up. So this is all evidence, apparently, pointing to the fact that not only are we living in the last days, but specifically the last days as defined for us by Jehovah's Witnesses. There's just one problem. It may make sense to a Jehovah's Witness who's been indoctrinated to believe that all of these are signs that we're in the last days. All of this is evidence and fulfilled prophecy. But to anybody else who hasn't been indoctrinated to think like a Jehovah's Witness, this is just nonsense.
Pretend you're somewhere else. You're not in this assembly hall. Instead, you're at an international convention, a huge stadium. And you are one of the special ones invited because you have a foreign assignment as a missionary, construction worker in another branch territory. You've been invited to this special convention, and the beautiful thing is a member of the governing body is going to address you personally as a group. They found a location big enough. They set up chairs. There's a microphone. But the place that it's located is right near a truck dock. And in the truck dock are 2 garbage trucks. And as the various ones come in for this beautiful, encouraging talk by a governing body member, they smell this horrid smell. It's putrefying. The prayer's been given. Governing body comes to the microphone. His eyes are watering because of the stench. He has a handkerchief at his nose. This is not going to be the encouraging visit you expected. And so the governing body member says, as he looks over at the garbage trucks, "Take these things away from here." And that, my friends, is the title of this part. Take these things away from here.
I think Ken Flodin needs to be taken away from here and given some quite extensive counseling because, wow, this guy is unraveling in front of us. So Ken Flodin is a helper to the teaching committee. The teaching committee comes up with the material for the convention. And it's always fascinated me that Ken Flodin is so esteemed by this organization as a teacher, as someone who is able to communicate, that he is on the teaching committee of the governing body, and he is also presenting so much of Jehovah's Witness video content. Apparently, this is a man who is good at communicating. And this is a man who's good at coming up with illustrations. He's given the theme, "Take these things away from here," and he immediately launches into an illustration which is essentially worshipping the governing body, or encouraging a mentality where an event is only truly meaningful, only truly something that we would enjoy or derive value from if there is a governing body member present. That's the mental image he's giving us. And somewhere along the line, he's got to work in garbage. This is a man who is apparently obsessed with using garbage in illustrations.
When Jehovah determines that someone has sinned against the Spirit, there's no forgiveness possible. That one's relationship with Jehovah has been forever ruined. Jehovah discards the person like a piece of garbage. Just the mud is cut away. And to Jehovah, that serious sin of the past is forever gone, putting on more layers of garlic powder. This does not immediately damage our relationship with Jehovah, but if we continue to veer away from the leading of God's Spirit, we sadden him. We grieve the Spirit.
So here is a man who apparently cannot come up with an illustration unless it involves garbage to some degree. You know, his mind is just incapable of coming up with metaphors that will help to express points unless there's garbage in some form as part of his narrative. That's interesting. Again, this is someone who is supposed to be esteemed for his teaching abilities. And yet all he can think of in terms of conveying his ideas and communicating the wisdom of the faithful slave is some things are good and some things are bad, and the things that are bad go in the garbage. And that's literally where this talk is going. So he goes on to talk about various behaviors that are garbage and that need to be disposed of as though they are garbage. It's a very, very childlike, simplistic way of seeing things. And yet this is one of the best teachers, apparently, that Jehovah's Witnesses have, to the point where he's on the teaching committee. It just doesn't make sense. What does make sense, what makes total sense, is this man's apparent obsession and veneration of the governing body. Because he's made it to where he is. He's made it to being so far up the ladder that he's on a governing body committee because he worships them. He thinks they're amazing. He's quite frankly an ass-kisser. Let's just be blunt. And he expects everybody else to be. So when he's thinking of this illustration, at no point does any kind of self-awareness kick in. At no point does he think, maybe I'm overdoing it a little bit here. Maybe this is going to look a little bit too much like I'm putting attention on the governing body rather than on Jesus or God. Maybe this will play directly into the Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult narrative because I'm venerating the leaders by making them the focal point here. He's incapable of that kind of self-awareness because he has devoted his entire life to serving the governing body, and he expects everybody else to do the same.
I like to feel my best.
Okay, let's get you out of this chair.
For others and for myself.
Nice work, Poppy.
Hey, thanks.
Some cardio, then we'll go to the service group?
Yeah, sounds good. Oh, hey, check out the sculpting routine for next week.
Hey girls, sculpt your body and drive men crazy with this high-intensity workout.
What?
She's certainly proud of her physique.
She's got millions of followers.
Yeah, I can see why.
She gets noticed. What's so wrong with a little attention?
In the video, the witnesses involved had not yet done anything wrong. But shall we say that they were entering a realm where it might be as if they stepped in something. Offensive to Christ Jesus' nostrils. Well, what was the first one? The potential of being drawn into sexual uncleanness. You're saying, come on, it was pretty benign, wasn't it? There's nothing wrong with an exercise program. True. But you notice what was driving it? It was something on the internet, a following. And when it said, you'll have a body that will make men's head turn, did that trigger something? What was behind that? What was the purpose? So our topic here is keep free from uncleanness. Uncleanness can involve things that titillate one, their feelings. And they want more. And they want more. It's like garbage sitting in the garage. It begins to stink further and further every day, every minute. We need to decisively get it off the property.
I don't know whether it's appropriate to laugh at this point. It's just because it's so tragic, isn't it? This man's mind is a mess. And what he's here doing is talking about a video. So I've shown you just a brief clip from the video. It shows a number of different scenarios. And in one of those scenarios, it's dealing with a couple who are considering evading taxes in order to get a bit more money in and get by and that kind of thing. So he's commenting on this video, and I'm showing you the part where he's specifically talking about the gym encounter and the Instagram reel or whatever it is where they talk about sculpting your body so that it will drive men crazy, or however they put it. Ken Flodine is talking about how it may seem benign, but this is a slippery slope to uncleanness. Because what's the objective here? Is it to keep fit, or is it to seduce men? Is it to titillate? Because titillating men with your body is a fast track to uncleanness and can make you offensive to Jesus' nostrils. His words. His words, not mine. Folks, do I need to add anything? Again, I'm just so glad when speakers like Ken Flodine step on the stage who are completely lacking in self-awareness. It's almost like Ken Flodine is a little bit of a throwback to Tony Morris. And I remember saying before Tony Morris got kicked off the governing body, whenever I was commenting on Ken's talks, it was almost like he was like a pupil of Tony Morris, in that Tony Morris had a very clear hatred of uncleanness or things that he perceived to be on the wrong side of the high standards that Jehovah's Witnesses are expected to follow. And Ken Flodine, the tone of his talks very much followed that. And what we now have on the governing body are kind of more palatable speakers like Gage Flegel, like Jeff Winder, like Mark Sanderson. And when they're talking, they have a bit more self-awareness, and what they say has a little bit more credibility. We don't really have the Tony Morris rants anymore. We sometimes get them still with Stephen Lett and with David Splain. Well, Ken Flodine, he's not a governing body member, although he clearly thinks very highly of the governing body, worships them, in fact. He's not a governing body member, but he fits into that category of Jehovah's Witness speakers, prominent Jehovah's Witness speakers, who are just completely lacking in self-awareness. They exist in this bubble where everything that might conceivably lead someone towards committing sin is automatically bad. And what it reminded me of when he was speaking was the way the Pharisees of Jesus' time were criticized for adding extra rules on needlessly to the law, to the point where they were creating a fence around the law. So the law covenant, or the Mosaic law, is so crucial for us to not break it. So let's create a whole bunch of other laws that stop people getting even close to breaking those rules. And isn't that precisely what we're seeing here? Precisely what we're seeing with Ken Flodin's slippery slope reasoning. Apparently, Jehovah's Witnesses need to be paranoid even about going to the gym and making their bodies look good, because what if they're doing it for the wrong reasons? What if this could lead to uncleanness?
Please read with me Ephesians 5, 3, and 4. It says, let sexual immorality, now that's an outright serious sin. But then it uses the word and. And it says, every sort of uncleanness or greediness not even be mentioned among you, just as is proper for holy people. Neither shameful conduct, nor foolish talking, nor obscene jesting, things that are putrefied. It says not befitting, but rather the giving of thanks. Uncleanness includes viewing pornography. It's true, it's not sexual fornication. There's no body contact. But it's stirring something up, and it's called uncleanness. Engaging in online discussions glorifying sex. Looking at provocative images wherever they are. It could be in a catalog. Sexting, again, no physical contact, but it is sexual uncleanness. So, nothing wrong with the sister's exercise routine. But it was this online tantalizing voice in her ear that could lead from bad to worse, like garbage sitting in the garage. It needs to be taken out to the landfill and burned. Well, we commend all of you, and when I say all of you, I'm not talking about those in their late teens and 20s. I'm talking about all of you, whatever age, all of you who are holding fast to the high moral standards of Jehovah, including staying away from uncleanness. What a treasure you are. And if you're battling that, what should you do? Take decisive action now like Jesus did. Drive it out. Drive it out of the dock to the dump.
There he goes with his garbage again. It's just his default metaphor that he reaches for every time. But in all seriousness, this is just sexual repression. This is just an entire generation receiving the same orders that the previous generations received, that I think mess with people on a very profound level. Again, it's creating this fence around what the Bible actually says about sex, and it's creating all these other restrictions and all these other rules that impede on people's sexual development. And I think, you know, when you mess with people's sexual development or sexuality, you're really playing with fire. I genuinely believe that. I think it can have profound repercussions later in life when you stop people from exploring their sexuality in a healthy way and you impose needless boundaries. But again, this is a talk that could have been given by Tony Morris. It's just a throwback to the Morris era of talks. And Ken Flodine, who gets to give this talk and write this talk in a way because he's on the teaching committee, Ken Flodine is almost outright declaring himself as almost a disciple of Tony Morris, who's wanting to keep that flame burning, that flame of repression, of needless rules, of anger, of clamping down, and of telling people how they should live their lives. That was very much the Tony Morris playbook, and it's alive and well, at least in the form of Ken Flodine.
Hebrews 13:18. It says, keep praying for us, for we trust we have an honest conscience as we wish to conduct ourselves honestly in all things. Well, the issue shown there in the video was related to maintaining a clean conduct and protecting the cleanliness of the congregation. Don't introduce commerce into worship. Exactly what Jesus was concerned about in the reenactment. And dishonesty can go beyond into other things.
What was Jesus' motive for throwing out the money changers and speaking as he did? He loved righteousness and hated lawlessness, just as foretold at Psalm 45:7. Simply says, you loved righteousness and you hated wickedness. That is why God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of exaltation more than your companions. Hebrews 1:9 continues by saying, you loved righteousness and you hated lawlessness. He had authority to act as he did. He called the temple the house of my Father. Jesus' zeal for righteousness moved him to denounce the commercial activity in the temple that dishonored his Father and pure worship.
Isn't that interesting? So I'm just showing you a montage from the final two talks on the Saturday of the convention, both of which are denouncing mixing commerce and worship. Apparently, you shouldn't mix commerce with worship. And I've put the two together because they're both saying the same thing, and I find that so interesting because of the blatant hypocrisy. So Ken Flodine is talking about a video that depicts a sister or Jehovah's Witness woman who starts a business where she's selling things, and she decides to conduct her business at a convention or at an assembly.
Exciting new products. Come check them out at section A2 and sent.
So she's using places of worship or meetings and conventions as an opportunity to drum up business. And that would be, in Ken Flodine's mind, and I think in everyone's mind, mixing commerce with worship. And then you see in the next talk, Samuel Hurd, governing body member, saying more or less exactly the same thing. There's just one small problem. Jehovah's Witnesses, as an organization, very much mix commerce with worship. And rather than repeat stuff that I've already spent a lot of time explaining, because I want to keep this relatively brief, I'm going to point you to 3 videos on my channel. One is fairly recent. It's actually a JW Watch live stream where myself and the panel discuss some asset management companies that were set up in Ireland by Jehovah's Witnesses. So there is Mina Asset Management, Mina spelt M-I-N-A. There is Mina Treasury, and there is Lepta Asset Management, all owned and operated by Jehovah's Witnesses. asset management companies being set up by Jehovah's Witnesses. They're in the business now of managing assets. How is that not commerce? And how is that not mixing commerce with worship? Would be my question. You also have the debacle over Kingdom Halls and the way the organization introduced stealth tithing to basically extract money from all congregations. It even called it a master plan, and I summarized this whole thing in a video called Unrighteous Riches. Again, I don't want to repeat everything that I've already said in the video, but if you want to learn more and you haven't seen this already or you're not aware of it, please do check out that video. And finally, there's my Watchtower Investments video, which explains how the organization essentially profits from commercial companies through investments that have been bequeathed to the organization. So the organization invites, as one of the many forms of donating, it invites people to bequeath them things, whether it's property, real estate, or investment funds. And there's one very well documented example, the Henrietta Riley Investment Fund, which includes companies like Boeing, Amazon, all sorts of other companies that aren't necessarily doing things that align with Jehovah's Witness worship. But the point is they're very much involved in commerce, one way or another. One way or another, they are involved in buying and selling, in companies trading, and directly in managing assets because they literally own several asset management companies. And yet they have the gall to lecture Jehovah's Witnesses on keeping commerce out of worship.
I'm so happy we did this.
Me too.
And thanks again for your help with Mom.
Oh yeah, no problem. I'm surprised she lets you out of her sight when you're in town.
I told her that cousin time was essential, even though that's not really a thing, is it? So, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Do you remember Dylan?
From school, yeah. Why?
Well, let's say, hypothetically, that I ran into him yesterday, and within seconds he was asking about you.
Oh no.
So, if I very literally gave him your number, you wouldn't be mad, right?
We could put it back together in the next hour. That'd be great.
Aaron.
Hey, Mr. Shaw.
Great to see you. Can I get your help with something?
Sure.
Excellent. I'm glad I caught you.
What can I do for you?
So, we have city council elections coming up, and I have a proposition that could benefit the both of us. I'm going to run for city councilor, and I want to feature your business, really you, in my election campaign. Now, we used your profile photo for a mock-up, but we'll have a photo shoot.
Come on, Poppy. He's a good guy. Just talk to him. Why not?
You went to meetings long enough to know why.
No, this is not a Jehovah's Witness thing. You don't have to marry him just because he texts you. This is just about, being with someone.
Maisie, you know I live my life by Bible principles.
Listen, I'm being serious, okay? You've taken good care of yourself. But we're on the wrong side of 30, girl.
We do not see things the same way.
Don't you deserve to be happy?
You represent what's good about our community. And I want others to know that I'll have their back the same way that I've had yours. This type of exposure could do wonders for you.
Thank you so much for your kind words. But let me explain why I'll have to decline.
You're overthinking this. It's not about forever. You just don't need to spend the best years of your life alone.
Maisie, of course I want to find someone someday. But when I do, I want them to believe what I believe. That serving Jehovah's the most important thing in life.
It's just... you're gonna pass up every opportunity.
Thank you for caring about me, but really, I'm okay.
I give my complete support to God's kingdom. That's why I remain neutral when it comes to politics.
I just don't understand.
Well, I'd be happy to share more if you'd like. There's an article
No, that won't be necessary. I have to say, I'm really disappointed by all of this, especially after everything that I've done for you. I really hope you'll reconsider.
Thank you for respecting my beliefs. I can assure you that I won't.
I'm going to have to think about what this means for us going forward. Aaron, I hope we can get past this.
I don't get it. At all. But at the end of the day, I just want you to be happy.
I am happy, and I will be if I stick with Jehovah. That's what I want.
Okay. I can respect that. But you may need to block him.
I can't believe you gave him my number.
I'm sorry.
Oh dear, Jehovah's Witnesses are being tempted in these two scenarios. So this is a dramatization that gets shown during the final talk on the Saturday. And as you've just seen there, one of these scenarios involves a witness woman being tempted by her cousin who wants to connect her with a worldly friend. And it's made very clear, as Jehovah's Witnesses know, that you need to only date or consider marriage within the religion. It's something that imposes a needless restriction on people sexually, because immediately your pool of options is narrowed down to whoever you happen to run into within your religion. Within a religion consisting of only 9 million people globally, you have to choose someone from within that religion who you might run into. And it kind of forces people together who, you know, in some cases it works out. It just so happens that a good relationship comes under those circumstances. But I think it also throws together a lot of people who aren't right for each other. It creates a lot of dysfunctional relationships when you make that rule and tell people you can only be romantically involved with someone who is of a certain religion. You can only choose from someone who is in your religious minority. And then you have this whole thing about Christian neutrality. Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed to be involved in politics in any way, shape, or form. And so in the other half of the dramatization, you get this guy whose boss is pressuring him to be involved in his election campaign in some way. And the boss reacts in kind of a toxic way, almost like threatening the guy, saying, I'll have to rethink what this means for our future together. As though that's how people will react under those circumstances. Again, it's creating a stereotype of the unyielding, unreasonable, worldly person who just expects a Jehovah's Witness to compromise on their beliefs and on their principles. And when there's any pushback, when a Jehovah's Witness stands their ground, they need to expect this kind of passive aggression, at least to begin with. I mean, he starts to make nice noises as the conversation ends, but the initial reaction is definitely kind of passive aggressive. So again, this is just classic propaganda. It's creating this bogeyman under the bed for Jehovah's Witnesses to be fearful of, either the boss who ambushes you at work and tries to make you compromise on your Christian neutrality, or the worldly cousin who tries to arrange for you to hook up with someone who isn't in your religion. And this perfectly demonstrates just how controlled the lives of Jehovah's Witnesses are. Anyway, those were my thoughts on the Saturday of the 2025 Pure Worship Convention of Jehovah's Witnesses. All that remains is for me to comb over the material considered by Jehovah's Witnesses on the final day, the Sunday of the convention. So look forward to that rebuttal in the coming days. But that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for watching.